Welcome back to another episode of Dueker Sports. It's the offseason, as we discussed last week, and now the next season hasn't even started. The offseason really hasn't even started, but we're going to start it for you right here today. We're giving you our top 5 unrestricted free agents. So there are going to be other free agents that are going to hit the market, but these are the guys right now who are unrestricted free agents, and some of these guys I expect probably will re-sign with their teams. But either way, we're going to have some fun with it here today. And yeah, we're each going to give you our top 5, and we'll see. I don't know his list. I don't know that he knows mine. But we're going to go ahead and get it started. I'll go first. So here's my top 5 unrestricted free agents as of today. I've got number 1, Lamar Jackson. I've got Derek Carr, number 2. That may surprise some people. I'm going to tell you why in a second. I've got Geno Smith, number 3. Followed by Jamel Dean and Jesse Bates. Okay. Number 1, it's easy. Lamar Jackson is the only MVP that's going to be hitting the unrestricted free agent market. That makes it pretty simple to me. The guy's been the best player in the league. He's obviously very talented on the ground, like dual threat quarterback, which is all the rage in the NFL right now. And you look at his stats last year, he had a quarterback, he got injured. He did miss 5 games. But he threw for 2,242 yards, 17 touchdowns, 7 picks. He had a 91.1 quarterback rating. He also ran for 764 yards and 3 touchdowns. And he missed 5 games. Sorry. Missed 5 games. He still ran for 764 yards. And that's actually the lowest amount of rushing yards that he's had since his rookie season. That's absurd. I think that he still is tremendously talented. I agree. I forget who it was. I was seeing on Twitter another player who was saying, I want to see Lamar Jackson with a true number 1 wide receiver. I could not agree more. I think if he could get out of Baltimore, they haven't really provided him with any legitimate number 1 receivers, in my opinion, pretty much his entire career. And last year was probably the worst receiving core he's had yet. They lean on their tight ends and their run game there. Primarily, he's the reason why the run game even works. One thing that I want to do also for this episode is I want to give you some landing spots for these guys. I'm just going to do the landing spots for quarterbacks because I think that's going to be the most fun. So, okay, the Ravens are number 1 for me because I don't know how you do not pay the man in Baltimore. He pretty much is that entire offense. But they would be my number 1. But I've got some other landing spots for you that I think are going to be very interesting. My number 1 landing spot outside of Baltimore, the Seattle Seahawks. And I'm going to tell you why. Because you look at Geno Smith. Geno Smith just had a great year. He led the league in completion percentage. But how enticing would it be to see Lamar Jackson go play for Pete Carroll in Seattle? Look what Russell Wilson did in Seattle. Then they replace him with Geno Smith, and he looks like the new Russell Wilson. I would love to see what Lamar Jackson could do in Seattle with that offense. He's used to playing in that kind of weather, being in Baltimore. I think that he would open that offense up. You look at a team that's young. They did a great job in the draft last year. They're going to have some cap space here. I think that would be a perfect landing spot for Lamar Jackson, and it would jolt the Seahawks right into, I think, possible Super Bowl contenders. I would love to see him play with 2 legitimate receivers. They have a great running game there as well. The running backs way more talented than they have in Baltimore. They've improved their offensive line drastically. I think that would be a super exciting fit. My number 2, the New York Jets. The New York Jets have been needing a quarterback for as long as I can remember. Brett Favre is the best quarterback they've had since I've been watching football, and that's been some time ago, and he was only there for 1 year. Tell me that the New York Jets fan base and the city of New York would not be absolutely thrilled to add a former MVP to that roster. You saw them put talent around Zach Wilson last year. He still did not play well. They ended up having Mike White and freaking Joe Flacco playing quarterback. Lamar Jackson comes in there. This was a team at one point that a lot of people were saying was a lock to make the playoffs. I can't remember what their record was to start. It was like 5-2 or maybe even better than that. I don't remember. But I never thought they were a playoff team because, quite frankly, their quarterback play is awful. And then they started having injuries out the yang. I don't know. I'm just trying to say it cleanly. But yeah, that team had a lot of promise before those injuries. You get your starting running back. You get your offensive line back healthy. The defense is phenomenal. Put Lamar Jackson on a team. Once again, I think this is a team that starts to compete for the AFC East if you add them to it. So that's the Seahawks and Jets by far my top two options. There's a little bit of a gap to my next one, but I say the Saints would be an interesting fit for him. They need to find a new offensive game plan, honestly, because I don't know what the heck it is right now. You've seen the success that Taysom Hill has had in that offense, and he is not near the thrower that Lamar Jackson is. So plug Lamar Jackson in. You have a new leader on that team, which they desperately need, because between Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton, I don't think the answer is either one of those guys. You have Alvin Kamara, and he just got indicted for being involved in that fist fight, assault, whatever you want to call it, at the nightclub. So who knows what's going to happen with him. You just drafted Chris Olave. The guy's phenomenal. So you've got the young receiver, but you really need a quarterback. And the offensive line there is still pretty good. So I think you look at this team, to me, it makes way too much sense. With Lamar Jackson, I have a lot of teams because he can play anywhere. But I've got two more teams. Next up is the Colts. And my number one reason for the Colts is obviously other than the fact that they desperately need a quarterback because they don't really have anyone on the roster right now that can play the position. But Shane Steichen just went there to be the head coach. Where did he come from? He came from the Philadelphia Eagles. You just saw Jalen Hurts lead his team to the Super Bowl. He's a rushing quarterback. I think you bring Lamar Jackson in there. You create an identity for the Indianapolis Colts. And a team that was once great for so many years with Peyton Manning can be great again with a former MVP, Lamar Jackson. Final team I have is the Raiders. I have the Raiders really for two reasons. One, I think they're one of the most needy quarterback teams in the market. They're another team. Jarrett Stidham is pretty much the only quarterback on the roster right now. So they're obviously in the hunt. And the Raiders historically love speed. So bring in Lamar Jackson. There's no one that's faster at the quarterback position than Lamar Jackson. I think it'd be a fun fit. Now I'm going to go to number 2, which was, for me, Derek Carr. Now, I say Derek Carr over Geno Smith. That took me a while. I weighed it back and forth. I actually think that they're pretty much dead even for me. But here's why I've got Derek Carr ahead of him. You look at the career highs. Obviously, Geno Smith just had the best year of his career. Derek Carr's career highs are better than Geno Smith's across the board. And then people like he just threw 4,804 yards. Not this past season, obviously, but the year before. So he's 1 year removed from throwing almost 5,000 yards. And then to top that, the 2 years before that, he had his career highs in quarterback rating, back-to-back years. So this guy's not far removed. One bad season does not a career undo. Add that to famous quotes because that's going to go down in history because I think Derek Carr still got it. I think Derek Carr is extremely talented. The receiving core was very banged up for the Raiders last year. They also focused on the ground game. They ran the wheels off of Jacobs. So I think obviously the Devontae Adams trade, they gave up the world to get him. Didn't pan out the way that they thought it would, but I think it's because of the other injuries on that team. Their secondary receivers were definitely banged up. They lost one of the top tight ends in the league for over half the season. I think people are being way too hard on Derek Carr. I have seen Derek Carr play at a very elite level many times throughout his career. And I trust that over Geno Smith doing it kind of 1 year, but maybe not, and we'll talk about that in a second. But Derek Carr, to me, I understand he's coming off a horrible year, actually one of the worst years between Geno Smith or Derek Carr combined this year. But I think he is very capable. You kick the tires on this guy. You see if you got anything left. You probably can get him with a fairly friendly deal, I would imagine. Sign him to a 1 year prove-it deal. I don't care. But bring the guy in. I think that he could still lead some teams. And I'll tell you which teams he could lead. The perfect fit for Derek Carr, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You plug him into that team with those receivers, I think they might be better than they were this year with Tom Brady. Now, I'm not saying that Derek Carr is better than Tom Brady, but I am saying this 2 years ago, Derek Carr was a heck of a lot better than the Tom Brady this year. And that's the Derek Carr that I still think he can be. I don't, maybe he's not going to have 100 and something quarterback rating. But yeah, I think he had a 94 quarterback rating that year. He threw 4,800 yards. Plug him into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. Guarantee you he throws 5,000 yards. Guarantee you. They have one of the best receiving cores in the league. Derek Carr has played with some talented receivers. Never has he played in an offense like what the Buccaneers can offer him. And then give him some warm weather. Nothing clears the mind like the sandy beaches of Florida, the warm weather. Give him a chance. I think that you go down there, he regains his confidence. He finds some inner peace, even though he's not Aaron Rodgers, but everyone's looking for that inner peace. Buccaneers. Number 2 for me, I named them for Lamar Jackson as well, but the New Orleans Saints. I think you plug him into the New Orleans Saints. He has a former coach down there, guys. Dennis Allen has coached with Derek Carr before. You have some familiarity there. Also, like I said earlier, same thing with Lamar Jackson. I won't go into too much, but you got Chris Olave. You give him a deep threat. They have a decent offensive line. To me, it feels like a fairly lateral move to go to the Saints. That's why I've got them not number 1. The Buccaneers makes sense. But I think he's a significant upgrade over the quarterbacks they have right now, obviously. I've only got 2 more teams here. The Commanders, I think, would be probably the second most exciting for me because that's another team with a very good receiving core. We saw what Carson Wentz could do at times this past season. We saw what Taylor Heineke could do at times this season. We even saw what Sam Howell could do at times this season. Derek Carr, once again, significant upgrade over all 3 of those guys. And that talented receiving core, I think, once could revitalize Derek Carr's career. Probably the best receiving core he would play with. My final team for him is the Carolina Panthers. I don't think it's a good fit for him. I don't want to play in Carolina because I don't think that team is very good at all. But they do have DJ Moore, and this is a team that I think would love to have Derek Carr. I know that Sam Darnold just had a pretty decent season, his best season of his career by far. But you had Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield rotating the door. I think, once again, Derek Carr, proven veteran, comes in. But I've got them dead last because for some reason I think they're going to stick with Sam Darnold. And I guess if you want to go win 5-6 games again, I guess that's okay. Third on my list was Geno Smith. I love Geno Smith. I was super excited for the guy. He had a ton of success this year. He led the league in completion percentage. He threw 30 freaking touchdowns completely. He had only thrown, I think, 34 touchdowns his entire career coming into the season. He throws 30 this year. The guy absolutely had a phenomenal year. He actually, a lot of people are saying he's a one-year wonder. Last year, I get he didn't play that many games. He had 5 touchdowns to 1 interception. He had over 700 yards passing. He had a quarterback rating of over 100 back-to-back years. He's actually had 3 consecutive seasons of a quarterback rating of 94.2 or higher. That being said, he hardly played at all the 3rd season. That being said, I think he's shown enough that he deserves an opportunity somewhere. There are too many openings for quarterbacks in the league right now for him not to get a job. Now, once again, similar to Lamar Jackson, I think the Seahawks stick with them. They made the playoffs this year with him, with a team that was banged up off and on throughout the season. The defense wasn't great. They definitely overperformed, but I think he comes at a friendly cost for the team and gives them an opportunity to bring in more guys around them. So definitely my number 1 spot. Outside of them, this one would be very funny and dramatic. I could see him going back to the Jets. I don't know if he wants to, but it's a completely different team, completely different coaching staff there, in a very talented receiving core. So I think he goes there, and the Jets just need to do something, anything. So I think if they start to miss on these other quarterbacks at the top of this list, you have to do something because you're the New York Football Jets. You got to start doing something because you cannot stick with Zach Wilson. You obviously aren't going to stick with Joe Flacco. We saw that. And Mike White is not the answer. I'm sorry. He had that one phenomenal game, and then he really fell off a cliff, which is what he's actually done that a couple of times in the past too. He's like a flash in a frying pan. You can't stick with the guy. Now, obviously, some of these guys may be looking for the draft to solve some of these issues, but why not bring in a guy like Geno Smith? The mental toughness on this guy, they wrote him off, but he didn't write back. What better guy to groom a quarterback, even if it's for just part of a season? Let him come into the New York Jets. Let him be a savvy veteran on this team. At the very least, you remain competitive while you're grooming a quarterback, because I kind of like the wait and see approach with some of these rookie quarterbacks. And if you can sit them for a year and make the playoffs, that's a great thing. So I think Geno Smith would give the Jets the possibility of doing that. And then once again, I'm not going to talk about this team because I've talked about them 2 times already. The Saints made all 3 lists because I don't know necessarily that they go like, is Geno Smith really that much of an upgrade over Jameis Winston? It could be seen either way. But given what I saw this year, you want a guy who doesn't turn the ball over, and he's done a phenomenal job the past 2 years. He's thrown 35 touchdowns to 12 interceptions his last 2 years combined. That's phenomenal. That's what they're looking for. Andy Dalton played decently well for them. It'd be interesting to see what Geno Smith could do there. Now I've got two non-quarterbacks. Obviously, I had to put the quarterbacks first because it's the most important position on a football team. So I went very quarterback heavy. But there are 2 guys here that I think are phenomenal defenders, and I left a lot of guys off the list. I started with a list of 11, and it was very difficult to me to get it down to these 5. But Jamel Dean, I've got him here primarily because, one, he's a young cornerback, and quarterbacks are a very valuable position in the league. They are not easy to find. So you look at this guy, Pro Football Focus has given him a 75 or higher rating in each of the 4 seasons in which he's played. He's coming off the season with 51 tackles and 2 interceptions. Very talented, very young corner. This guy's going to sign a massive contract. Carlton Davis signed a pretty big contract a year ago with the Buccaneers, and Jamel Dean is better than he is. He's outplayed him 2 years in a row now. So I think you look at this contract, you're looking at a contract that I think could be $60 million for Jamel Dean. So I didn't do landing spots for these guys, but I think that many, many teams would love to bring in a guy like Jamel Dean. My number 5, Jesse Bates, barely makes the list, but he makes the list primarily because the guys ahead of him, the guy actually knocked off the list for him was Levante David. And I'm going to be honest, Levante David is a much better player. If I had to rank him as best players on this list, he'd probably be number 2, but he's 33 years old. So I had Jesse Bates. The dude's only 25 years old. He's coming off of a season with 71 tackles, 4 interceptions. Just 2 years ago, Pro Football Focus said he was the number 1 safety in the league. Obviously, he hasn't performed quite up to that standard the 2 years since, but he's still a very serviceable safety who's 25 years old. That's 2 years younger than Christian Rai. The dude's got plenty of gas left in the tank. I think, Pro Football Focus said this year he was the 13th best safety, but what he does best is in the run game where he finished top 5. And the year that he was ranked number 1 overall safety, a big reason why was his ability to make tackles in the run game. I can think of many teams, Eagles, that could really use a guy like Jesse Bates. So that's my top 5 free agents. I love free agency. Outside of the draft, like the first 2 weeks of free agency is like a 2-week Christmas for me. The NFL draft, nothing tops that. But yeah, free agency is going to be exciting. If Lamar Jackson does not sign a contract with the Baltimore Ravens, how many times do you see an MVP quarterback in his 20s hit the open market? He's going to get a massive contract from somebody. It's just whoever's going to pay him. I still kind of really hope that it's the Seattle Seahawks. I'm going to throw in one crazy team. The Minnesota Vikings would be a very exciting team because do you move on from Kirk Cousins? How many years are you going to do this? That's a team that is on the bubble. I've named so many teams for Lamar Jackson, but he can play so many places. The Minnesota Vikings, if you're listening to this, think about it. Just think about it. All right, Christian, let's see your top 5 unrestricted free agent list.
So here's my top 5. I think we have a lot of overlap here. I had to boot Jesse Bates out. I think he's my number 6 ranked, and I'm kind of like you. I valued youth over old people, except we got some 2 old heads on this list. I'm going to start at number 5, Geno Smith, 32 years old, had the best season of his career by far. To me, I think he stays put with the Seahawks. The problem is where I see Geno Smith's career going is essentially a one-hit wonder. His following years aren't going to be terrible. They're going to be much better than earlier in his career, but I don't think he's ever going to reach the production or the efficiency that he did this year. So to me, I think he's going to sort of flame out, and then I think he's going to consider probably a coaching gig later on in his career. So to me, I think he sticks with the Seahawks. I actually don't think he makes big money. I wonder if he signs another 1-2 year deal, kind of like a prove it deal with an opt out clause. Um, I just don't see any team willing to give him big money. But based on his production this year, um, no question, I think there's going to be some interest. I think the Seahawks are going to try and get him back because he ran their system really well. To me, I actually think the biggest part of his success really belongs to Pete Carroll and their offensive scheme. I think it plays really well to what Geno Smith does best. But I'm with you. I think there are some other teams out there that would, kick the tires on him. To me, number 4, Jamel Dean. Just like you said, Carlton Davis got a large contract. Jamel Dean's better. Jamel Dean has 4.3 speed. He's got all the athleticism in the world. He's got great ball skills. He, I think there's a game where Carlton Davis was playing the Chiefs when they had Tyreek Hill, and he gave up 200 yards receiving to Tyreek in the first quarter. Jamel Dean was hurt that game. If Jamel Dean had been playing, my guess is Jamel Dean would have been taking Tyreek Hill over Carlton Davis. I still think Tyreek would have got his numbers, but that's how big of an impact Jamel Dean can make, and his absence can really hurt a defense. He's only 26 years old. To me, there's an interesting team here that I think should take a look at him. I'm not sure if they have the cap space. I actually didn't look at their cap space, but I think the Jacksonville Jaguars should take a strong look about taking an interconference player from uh, basically from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and add them to their secondary. I don't think they have really uh, big standout corners since Jalen Ramsey left their team, and I think Jamel Dean would be a perfect addition to add to a defense that they need to start building because their offense is continuing to mature as they're adding pieces around Trevor Lawrence. So to me, Jamel Dean, number 4, I think since 2019, he's had a Pro Football Focus grade of 89.9 since 2019. Um, and although he has some injury history, I think he is one of the best corners in football. Number 3 is Orlando Brown Jr. The guy is 26 years old. I don't quite agree with all of his Pro Bowl selections, but he has them. I think some of them come in name only, but he played at right tackle and succeeded. He played at left tackle, both for the Ravens and now the Chiefs. He succeeded. He's a Super Bowl champion now from weeks 10 to weeks 17 of this season. He had a pass block grade of 88.7, and that was third best among all left tackles in football. So I know that he was dealing with a knee injury earlier in the season, but it sounds like the healthier he got, the more acclimated he was to Andy Reid's system, the better he was at left tackle. I do think he has limitations. He's not the most athletic left tackle in the world, but he's got amazing arm length, and he is one of the strongest offensive linemen I think I've ever seen in my life. Um, and so, like, to me, 26 years old, he's got the hardware, he's got the accolades. It's going to be hard pressed for the Chiefs to actually let him go. They're probably going to franchise tag him. I think he's most likely to stay with the Chiefs. If I'm the general manager, it would either be a sign or trade, or I'd let him walk and we draft a left tackle. He's just going to be too expensive. You're not going to find very many left tackles with his experience level, his youth, and the accolades around him, and coming off a Super Bowl performance where he allowed 0 sacks and had probably the best performance of his career in that game against a vaunted pass rush. So he's going to be commanding a lot of money, and if I'm general manager, I can't pay that. I can't pay what he wants. He needs to go somewhere else. But I know Brett Veach wants to keep him in the building. And I think given his youth and his experience in big games and how well he played down the stretch, I think he's the third best unrestricted free agent. Number 2, Derek Carr. This is where we have a lot of overlap. Number 2, Derek Carr. 2021 was his best season of his career, 4,800 passing yards, 23 touchdowns to only 11 picks. Not to mention his leadership intangibles. He led that team through quite quite the kerfuffle. It was a very bad year for the Raiders organization, and there's one bright spot, and that was Derek Carr. He's 31. He's going to be 32 in a little bit. But I think I agree with you. This guy has been blamed for a bunch of stuff that really isn't his fault. They traded an arm and a leg and some toes and some fingers from the other hand just to get Devontae Adams. And Devontae Adams actually had a phenomenal year. Uh, he wanted to play with Derek Carr, and Derek Carr gave him the football, and they succeeded. But the Raiders ran the football. That was their philosophy this year. Um, I don't know if Joshua Jacobs is going to be able to recreate this season next year. I think they just gave him too many carries. It kind of reminded me of the Larry Johnson season whenever we gave him the NFL record 416 carries. Josh didn't get that much, but it just felt like that. And it felt like down the stretch of the season, Joshua Jacobs was wearing out. But also that they just lost trust in Derek Carr. I don't blame Derek Carr. I think Darren Waller was hurt. Darren Waller's in his 30s. He's approaching the end of his career. They don't really have a reliable second, wide R2 really. So it's Devontae Adams or bust with their passing offense. And I think that kind of hurt Derek Carr because if you don't have weapons around Devontae Adams that can consistently get open and that you can trust, it's going to be hard to succeed. So I think along with the coaching carousel they've had, I just find it really hard to believe that Derek Carr is the problem here, and I think he's just really getting scapegoated for other organizational failures. To me, 100% agree. Bucks should be on his radar. I think the Colts should be on his radar, and I think the Jets. The Colts and the Jets should be clamoring for a quarterback because, in some senses, the Jets are a quarterback away from really making a playoff run, and the Colts have just been so starved since Andrew Luck left. They need a quarterback. They need to instill their team with actual belief that hey, they've got a guy under center that can get us the football and win us games and lead us to the playoffs and hopefully a Super Bowl. I think Derek Carr has the ability to lead a team to the playoffs. We know that one year he was set to win MVP till he got injured. It's kind of like a Carson Wentz situation. And then in 2021, he kind of destroyed that season with a better season, but really wasn't given the proper respect that I think he was due. So I'm if I'm those teams, if I'm general manager, out of all the quarterbacks on this list right now, I think I would have Derek Carr the most. I think he's the best pure passer out of all three quarterbacks on my list right now, and I think that he is probably the most experienced, given that he's 31 and he's played more games than the other two. Number one, obviously Lamar Jackson. He's the 2019 NFL MVP. I know why the Ravens haven't signed him. The Ravens haven't signed him because he's asking for a ton of guaranteed money. And as a general manager, my answer would be not no, but it would be bleep no. Lamar Jackson's going to be hard pressed to find anyone that's going to be willing to fork over a fully guaranteed contract in the NFL. You just don't get that in the NFL. That's NBA money. And I don't even like it really in the NBA. But that's besides the point. It's a totally separate argument. There's just not going to be a team that's going to give him that amount of money fully guaranteed unless you're the Browns and you have sexual assault problems on your rap sheet. Then suddenly you get fully guaranteed money. But there's not going to be another stupid team like the Browns. They already got their quarterback. So you're going to be hard pressed to find another team to give you that kind of money. Not to mention um, your main attribute is your athleticism. At 26 years old, you're hitting the peak of your physical prime. You're not going to be able to play to the same caliber as Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady in their late 30s, and that's what teams are looking for. They're looking for stability and a person that can throw accurately and consistently, and can read defenses pre-snap. They're looking for that because those skills aren't perishable. They last you throughout your entire career. And Lamar Jackson's just not there yet. If I'm a general manager, I'm not going to pay him the money. But I do know out of all the players on this list, he has an MVP. He is one of the most beautiful players to watch play. He is we went to a game. We went to Chiefs Ravens together, and Lamar Jackson, just him and Tyreek Hill pop off the page. It was amazing to see these two just super athletes in person on the same field. They're so captivating. Lamar Jackson is a captivating, beautiful player to watch. The more that he increases his passing skills, the better he is, the more marketable he'll be around the NFL. He's got an MVP to his name. I do think that the Ravens might capitulate and end up giving him the money, because I do think you're right. Like J.K. Dobbins averaged, I think, 6 yards a carry, but the dude's pretty much injury prone. Rashad Bateman, a great right wide receiver talent, injured most of the year. Had basically no one to go to throw to except Mark Andrews. So to me, I'm like, you know what? Maybe the Ravens are going to be like, hey, we need this guy. There's no way we're going to win games. If we don't have him, we're going to be in limbo for like 3 seasons until we find ourselves a quarterback. So I can see them capitulating to his demands, paying him. But I think the Colts should be clamoring for Lamar Jackson. During the legal tampering period, I'm getting on the phone. I'm calling Lamar Jackson. I'm giving him whatever he wants if I'm the Colts, because they're so starved. The Jets, on the other hand, don't be desperate. You've got a great roster. I think you could go after Lamar Jackson. He's going to be expensive. He's going to cost a hefty price, apparently. But I think you're like one player away, and that player's Lamar Jackson. We get him on our team. Playoffs, here we come. And I agree with your assessment on Lamar as well. For some of the other teams around, the Saints are a fantastic pick. The Seahawks would be intriguing. Let's get the superior version of Geno Smith and Lamar Jackson. That would be an amazing pickup for the Seahawks. But overall, yeah, that's my list. Lamar Jackson, cream of the crop on this list.
So I think you did a phenomenal job making the case for each of your guys. I really respect that list. There is something that I thought about with each of the teams, or each of the players that you talked about. So with Geno Smith, and we agree on this, you're talking about like he's going to sign a cheaper deal. I think he's going to make a great coach someday. I really do. I think no matter where he signs, whether it's back with Seattle or it's with another team, it's going to be, I think that if he hits the free agent market, he can sit there for a little while, because I think it might be a team that goes through the draft. Maybe they don't get their guy. They miss out on some of these other free agent quarterbacks, and they draft him. And I think no matter where he goes, it's a 1 or it's a 2-year deal tops for me, because there's still a lot of unknowns when it comes to Geno Smith. Another thing, you talked about Orlando Brown, and I'm super glad you said it, because the same thing I was about to say, and there's a reason why he didn't make my list. I feel like he hardly ever puts together a complete season. I feel like he has these highs and lows, and his highs are high and his lows are low. And he usually, so to me, I kind of put him like, I don't even know if he's a top 10 tackle over the course of a season. If he is, he's flirting with that top 10. And so I understand not wanting him to leave the building, but I'm going to tell you what I don't understand. If you franchise tag the guy, it's going to be a very expensive deal for 1 year. I think you can only franchise tag him one time, because if you do it again, you got to pay him the average of the top 3 highest paid players of the position. At that point, you're paying way too much. So maybe you franchise tag him one time, but I don't know where he's going to go and get that money, because I think it'll be a team with just a ridiculous amount of cap space. I'm looking at you, Chicago Bears. That's a team that I can see him going to all day long, adding some toughness, and someone's going to have to overpay him to get him there. So for Kansas City, I do agree. I think maybe they sign him via franchise tag, but the dude's way too expensive for what he does. I understand he finished the season playing phenomenally well. He had a great playoff run, but as a whole, and he did it again this season, beginning of the year, he definitely struggled. I can't remember how many pressures. Then he gave up like 39 pressures or something like that. Now, he did only give up, I believe, 3 sacks, which is pretty impressive. But yeah, I just think the dude's too expensive. So let's see. And then you talked about Derek Carr's leadership. Thank you for saying that. I forgot to say that. Derek Carr did an absolutely phenomenal. Seems too not enough. It really just doesn't seem enough for what he did. I can't remember what the term you used. What was it they used for the Raiders?
Intangible. Oh, the Raiders?
Yes, the organization. I forget what you called it.
So they're extremely dysfunctional, and
Yeah.
I've got other choice words for them because I'm a
You
Chiefs
used
fan.
a
So
term that was not nearly severe enough. It was nothing short of an absolute total organizational collapse by the Raiders, from the head coaching position to the front office to players going to prison. Very unfortunate situation. Someone died in that situation. Derek Carr managed it all. He stood by the side of his players, including Henry Ruggs. That press conference was so emotional for me. Uh, everyone was piling on Henry Ruggs. And he said, obviously, I don't love the situation, but I love the man. And he talked about no one's hurting worse than Henry Ruggs. We don't need to be piling on. Stood by a guy when nobody else was doing it. That was like the best example of leadership I've ever seen. And then, yeah, he stayed there with the Raiders. And it wasn't a one-time thing. The Raiders seem to be always dysfunctional. I'm thinking it's probably Mark Davis at this point, but the whole organization is kind of a crap show, in my opinion.
bro, as long as Mark Davis has that haircut, the Raiders are gonna
Ridiculous.
fail.
And then they had Gruden. I'm like, you have two of the worst haircuts in the league on the same. I don't know what that was. There's too much. I think Gruden was the only chance the Raiders had. I understand that he's in hot water due to the racial issues. That was controversial. Uh, I definitely think the things that he said cannot be said, though. And so I understand it. But I think that was their one chance at like actually somewhat riding this ship. You
Yeah.
bring in a guy like Josh McDaniels, who I don't know if his just system is too complex outside of New England or what happens. The guy cannot have success anywhere other than under Bill Belichick, and I don't see it happening with the Raiders
He
at
can't
all.
film people. That's what's happening.
I guess that maybe that's the issue here. But yeah, I think you look at the Raiders, you look at Derek Carr. I love that you brought up his leadership. You're gonna get mad at me here. I thought of some more teams with Lamar Jackson
Oh no.
while you were talking, because you brought up some good points. You're talking about his guaranteed money, and I started thinking of the teams that I'm looking at, who can offer him the guaranteed money. Okay, and then also teams you quote you, no one's stupid enough to do that. Oh, but
Outside of
Christian,
the
yes they
Browns.
are. Oh, yes there are teams. The Browns are taken, unfortunately. I got another organization for you. Who's the
Uh-oh.
second most cursed organization in the NFL?
The second most cursed organization
Yeah,
in the NFL?
Browns got it. Browns got number one. Who's number two?
Well, oh man, it's pretty
I'm putting you on
simple.
the spot.
Yeah, you did. That would be, well, man, now there's a few teams because there's one in the, well, during the Patriots years, there was a snake-bitten franchise called the Miami Dolphins, but for some reason, every time the Patriots played the Dolphins would somehow figure out they were a football team. So I would say they were pretty cursed. Um, there's a team down in Texas called the Houston Texans. They're pretty cursed.
Mhm.
Lamar Jackson hasn't done anything bad off the field, so they might be willing to shell out money to him. I don't know, but who are you thinking of?
The Detroit
The
Lions.
Detroit
The
Lions.
Detroit Lions are extremely cursed, and they're trying their dangest right now to get out of that. I don't know what bad mojo, but are they out yet? I don't know. This seems like a move to me. Jared Goff, I think they should stick with him. He played phenomenally well. He had one of the best seasons in the league this year. Uh, if they had an award for most improved, I'd probably give it to Jared Goff. But Jared Goff has played extremely well everywhere he's went. There's a reason why he was the number one pick in the draft. I think you stick with him. But here's the danger with them. The Detroit Lions, I think that's another team, and I've heard a lot of people talking about him going to the Detroit Lions. And where there's smoke, there could possibly be fire. It could be just a bonfire and we're overreacting, or it could be a forest fire. And the Detroit Lions they're a team in the top 10 in terms of cap space. They're number 10, but it just seems like a move they're willing to make. You did name one of the teams, the Houston Texans. They're number 5 in terms of cap space. I think this is a team, they're on the brinks of I can't even think, they're going to lose their fan base and they're going to have to move to a new city, because how long are fans going to wait for this team to do something worth mentioning? Because Matt Schaub is one of the best quarterbacks probably this team has ever had. Might possibly be the best quarterback this team has ever had. How long is that going to last? And then they would make the playoffs, and I would be interested to see what their playoff record is. I can't imagine it's that good. They haven't made it very many times, and now they've been stuck in no man's land for several years, and it is
Right.
not looking good. They are fifth in cap space. What else you got to lose? You throw at worst case scenario, you bring the fans back to the stadium for Lamar Jackson. Throw all the money in the world. I wouldn't blame them one bit. That's the one team on this list. I'm like, throw every damn dime you have at Lamar Jackson, because why not? What else are you gonna live for? At least live to fight another day. And for nothing else, you have an entertaining team for the next 5 years. The Raiders have the third most cap space, so that keep an eye on that. But the Seattle Seahawks, which is where I had them as the number one team, they're also top 10. They're eighth in cap space. So even more, I'm going to add more smoke to that fire, because I think that's a real possibility. That's a dark horse team for me. If the Ravens don't pony up and pay him, I guarantee you somebody's going to do it. Someone's going to pay him a ridiculous contract. Will he get fully guaranteed? I doubt it, but will he get very close to it? Probably, because I see some teams that are very desperate, and no team more desperate than the Houston Texans. But yeah, I think you had a great list. I appreciate all of the insight that you gave.
Likewise.
I'm super excited for free agency. I cannot freaking wait. It's coming up quicker than you think, people. It comes up, I believe, next month. I think it kicks off in March, and March begins next week, guys. So we are well on our way to another exciting offseason. And this is it. This was the offseason kickoff that you've been waiting for, right here on Dueker Sports. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching. I hope you guys found this as fun as we did, and we'll be back next time. We hope to see you again.